Have you ever heard the phrase intuition whispers, anxiety screams? Witches know there's a lot of truth to this statement. Your intuition is one way that the universal conscious energy field, witches know as spirit or source, can communicate with you. Other ways are synchronicities, dreams, divination tools like tarot, and channeled information. I think of intuition as a little message from my higher self, the part of me that's connected to spirit, to nudge me in the right direction. But your intuition can be difficult to discern from other inner messages that come from anxiety, fear, or ego. So in this video, I'm going to give you 7 tips that will help you tell the difference. First, if you're enjoying the content, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, What a Witch Knows. And for a tarot and personal channeling session with me, check out the link in the description box and pinned comment. So before we get into tips, let's talk about the importance of following your intuition. As a witch, learning to follow my intuition has been probably the most important spiritual lesson of all. Learning to follow your inner guidance and not the messages from society or social media makes you inherently authentic and powerful. Connecting to your intuition also helps you to be more in the flow of life, syncing you more easily to your natural strengths, and protecting you from people, places, or things that aren't meant for you. You'll hear some witches say, "My intuition is my religion." And this is something that I resonate with deeply. Everything I do is guided by my intuition, from working with divination tools like tarot cards or channeling information to deciding which direction to turn when I'm taking my daily walk. Being a witch, in my view, has a lot to do with being unafraid of your own power. Following my intuition is the primary way that I tune into spirit in order to manifest the best outcomes for the highest good of all. And there's nothing more powerful than that. When you are deeply attuned to your intuition, no one can tell you who you are or what to do. You decide that for yourself. And that's why society is so afraid of us. Even though our message is one of love and freedom, we don't follow the rules. And we live in a society that runs on rule following. So when you first start learning to tune into your inner guidance, it can be a pretty noisy place in there. There's a lot of messages that are going to crop up, and it can be difficult at first to discern how to identify intuition from the rest of the chatter. So many messages arise from fear, anxiety, or ego, and those are not the messages we want to follow, because those are the parts of ourselves that have been shaped and conditioned by the social matrix, aka other people, past traumas, or society in general. Some people would refer to that as the false self, the self that wants to fit into society in order to look good or to be safe or to be loved. Following fear, anxiety, or ego will just keep you trapped in the same patterns of inauthenticity that society has pushed on us in order to keep it running smoothly. But we're not here to be cogs in the machine, right? We're here to be our authentic selves. So here are 7 key differences between intuition and anxiety. 1. Anxiety is loud, intuition is quiet. So anxiety and fear will be chaotic. It will sound like alarm bells going off in your head. It's constantly rising to the top of your thoughts. It wants us to pay attention to it because it's coming from a very primal part of our brain that's linked to fight or flight. So it's trying to keep us safe from something that we perceive as a threat, whether that's physical, emotional, or mental. What's ironic about this is that many times this threat is often related to past trauma. It's not an actual threat, of course, not always. So when you are in actual danger, so many times it's your intuition that kicks in to keep you safe. But it doesn't feel loud. It feels quiet and soft, but also firm. Kind of like a grandmother who isn't going to raise her voice, but you know you better do what she tells you or else. Here in New York, where I live, we've all heard stories of people who've worked at the Twin Towers say, "Something told me not to go into work that day," referring to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Or you might have heard a friend say, "Something told me to switch lanes," just before they narrowly avoided an accident. Sometimes when intuition is talking to you about a situation or a person that you want to avoid, it can feel simply like a deep knowing. Your intuition will speak to you the loudest in moments of extreme danger, but your intuition is talking to you all the time. You just have to cut through the chatter and the noise of anxiety in order to hear it. 2, intuition speaks in action, anxiety speaks in outcomes. So intuition will usually give you a very simple and direct message of what action to take in that moment. Call your mom, turn right, send that pitch today. Again, it will be soft but firm. Typically, you won't have any idea why you're getting that message, but if you follow it, oftentimes in hindsight, it will make perfect sense. Whereas a message coming from anxiety, ego, or fear will usually speak to you in some kind of catastrophic outcome. So you're gonna die, you're gonna be abandoned, you're gonna be rejected, I'm gonna look stupid, I'm going to lose, I won't have enough money, I won't have enough time, I won't have enough love. And sometimes then your mind will jump in to try and control that catastrophic outcome and try to keep it from happening. But the initial message you get typically will not have any specific action associated with it. 3, intuition feels calm, anxiety feels urgent. Anxiety, fear, or ego will often come with a feeling of urgency, like I need to do something now to make this go away. With intuition, there is no urgency or panic. It feels very calm, and you'll feel very sure about it. Now, oftentimes you'll get messages from your intuition that you need to act on immediately in the moment, such as turn right, but you won't have that sense of panic or urgency associated with it. It will just be very simple and very straightforward. Just, this is the thing to do now. No muss, no fuss. 4, intuition starts in the body, anxiety starts in the mind. So when I'm on my daily walk and I'm just kind of letting spirit lead me where it wants me to go, and I come to a fork in the road, I will physically feel the direction I'm supposed to go. For me, it comes from my heart. So I feel like my heart is literally tugging me in the direction I'm supposed to go. Some people talk about it feeling in their gut. Sometimes I'll have a short mental message along with the tugging sensation, like turn right. But since I'm so tuned into it at this point, I usually follow the instinct once I feel it in my body, so it stops after that. But if you're not following the feeling, it can start in the body and then move to the mind until eventually it turns into a sort of all-encompassing, deep knowingness that seems to come from both inside you and outside you at the same time. Anxiety, fear, or ego, on the other hand, will typically start in the mind. It can then move to the body. And many people talk about sort of having a panic feeling in their chest. So for me, it feels above the heart. Similar how people talk about having their heart in their throat. Again, this will be different for everyone, so you'll have to tune into your own guidance on that. 5, intuition gets stronger with time. Anxiety or fear dissipates once the trigger is removed. The messages from fear, anxiety, or ego are usually associated with a trigger that can be linked to a past trauma. So for example, you were in a car accident when you were younger, so you get fear messages when you're in a car. Once you get out of the car, the fear messages will usually stop talking to you. With intuition, it will keep talking to you and get louder and stronger until you listen to it, sometimes even on and off over the course of years. If you feel the message and you follow it in the moment, then it will stop. But if you're resisting it, it will get stronger. It can be subtle at first, especially when it's in relation to a creative idea or an inspiration to move in a certain direction with your life path. Sometimes when you hear people talk about how they got ideas for a creative project, they'll say, it just dawned on me. The guidance that I've channeled is that intuition is very much like the first moments of dawn. You're in the dark, but you start to notice the darkness lifting a bit, and you start to make out all the shapes of the things around you. Then you start to see a faint glimmer in the sky. Eventually, the light starts to get brighter, but it's in a very gradual way. Intuition starts as just a glimmer, but if we ignore it, it will eventually become brighter and brighter, calling our attention to it. Usually, the more we ignore it, the brighter it gets. The trick is to learn to recognize the intuition when it's in the glimmer phase, so you can act on the universe's guidance sooner. 6, intuition comes out of nowhere. Fear, anxiety, and ego is usually associated with the trigger. So we've talked about how when there's messages from fear, anxiety, or ego, there are usually triggers associated with that. Intuition, on the other hand, will seem to come out of literally nowhere. So one thing you can do when you're feeling lots of inner messages, but you're not sure what they are, is that you can look around to determine if there's any potential triggers you're dealing with. Now, obviously, if you're getting fear messages because you're crossing the street and a car is coming towards you quickly, that's a survival instinct, and you need to follow through on that by getting out of the way. But if you're getting messages and you notice there's a trigger in your environment linked to a past trauma, so a dog walking past you and you were bit by a dog as a child, This can be an indication that you're dealing with a fear message from a trigger, not intuition. Intuition will often have no trigger associated with it and will sort of appear in your consciousness very suddenly and gently, kind of the way a feather or a leaf floats to the ground in front of you. 7, intuition feels light, anxiety feels heavy. When you're dealing with your inner messages, one of the best things you can do is identify how they're making you feel. So we talked earlier about intuition being a kind of glimmer. I've heard people talk about the term glimmer as the opposite of a trigger. It feels like hope, like enlightenment, sometimes like euphoria, especially when it's in relation to a creative idea. It doesn't necessarily mean that the path you're being drawn to will be easy. In fact, sometimes quite the opposite. But you'll have an overall positive sensation. A trigger message will feel dark, heavy, and restricting, whereas the glimmer of intuition will feel weightless and free. One exception to this, I'll just note, is that sometimes when you first feel intuition in your body, like how I talked about being pulled with my heart in a certain direction, it will feel like a physical weight is pulling you towards that direction you're supposed to go, that you're being physically drawn there. But I wouldn't describe this weight as a negative feeling. It's more that it's part of the all-encompassing, all-knowing feeling about the direction you need to go in. Whereas a trigger will feel heavy in the sense that you feel trapped or restricted, or you can't move, or you can't breathe in a bad way. Bonus tip, if you're stuck between two choices or two pathways, you can actually envision both of these choices in your head, one on the right and one on the left. Tune in and see which direction your body feels more physically drawn to help you make that decision. So there you have it, 7 tips for how to distinguish anxiety from intuition. I'll just end by saying, videos like these, I know there's a lot out here on the internet and they're great for getting tips and for introducing you to new concepts, but really so much of my message and the messages of other spiritual teachers are about helping you follow your own inner guidance. So even though this is a video about how to follow your own inner guidance, they're only tips and tricks that I have learned from my own experience. I would certainly encourage you to try them, but it is so important that you follow your own guidance if something works for you or doesn't work for you. If something I've said here today doesn't work for you, trust yourself and do what works for you first and foremost. That is what following your intuition and being a witch is all about. So thank you so much for listening, and I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts below. Take care and blessed be.